Hey guys, welcome to this OpenToonz tutorial. I'm Zach, and today we have kind of an advanced tutorial. First in my advanced tutorial series, I'll be discussing how to rig up a character. So as you can see here, I have this drawing of a character that I made in Photoshop. Not animatable, just one frame right here on this column. So, just a little introduction to what a rigged character is. A rigged character is pretty much when you break a character or a single series of drawings into different parts that can be moved individually. For example, there are two ways to animate a ball moving across the screen. One is drawing the ball, going to the next frame. And let me turn on the onion skin real quick. Going to the next frame, drawing another, going to the next frame, drawing another, going to the next frame, so on, so forth. And as you can see, if we turn the onion skin off, we have the ball moving across the screen. So what I did there was I drew completely new images for each individual frame. However, there's another way to animate this ball going across the screen. We could hide that layer real quick. Draw the ball right here. Oops, I had the wrong one selected. We could draw a ball right here. And then rather than drawing 6 individual new balls, I could just extend the exposure of this. Select the edit tool. Start its position right here by keyframing it, moving it over here and keyframing it. And now we essentially have the ball moving across the screen without me having to redraw anything at all. So pretty much what a rigged character is when you have a pretty sophisticated series of drawings merging into kind of one final image, where you can rotate and position things as needed using keyframes rather than having to redraw certain aspects of the drawing every frame. I mean, that's not to say that there'll never be a time where you have to go in and redraw something or hand draw something. That's not necessarily true, but you can quickly create new poses with the same drawings without having to redraw the character or parts of the character. So that's obviously a lot easier. It's a little bit harder to set up initially, but it's a lot easier to animate. The downside obviously being that the motions will be more robotic. And when I say robotic, I mean you can do some pretty good animation if you're thoughtful about where you place your keyframes and things, animation principles, anticipation and all that. You can still do those things, but ultimately it won't look quite as good just because of, how we process the line work. If there's not really much change in it, then it's going to look a little robotic. And that's kind of unavoidable, but it is a very common animation technique and something that you should really consider using, even if you are a traditional elitist, just because it's faster. And in all realism, when you're working alone or in small groups, you have to think of ways to speed up processes. And even in professional industries, you can see people using rigged characters in all sorts of situations. Think of maybe Rick and Morty, for example. That's a show that uses rigged characters, if not on a sort of mixed rig where they mix in certain hand-drawn sequences with a rigged character. It's not a completely hand-drawn animation. And completely 100% hand-drawn animation is starting to get a little phased out, so it's something that you're going to sort of have to accept even if you don't like how it looks. The better you get at it, the better it will look, if that makes any sense. So it's worth trying and knowing how to do. And I had said in an earlier video that OpenToonz wasn't very good for rigged characters. That's actually a lie. just the way it's laid out with the traditional X-sheet view, it was really just kind of my bias saying that like I couldn't really wrap my head around how you would stay organized with this sort of system, but it's actually really not that bad, and there are several tools that actually accelerate rigged animation. So I'm going to go ahead and cover that in this video. So without further ado, I'm just going to delete these two columns. And we're going to get started. So, just a little bit of terminology here before I really jump into this so that you guys don't get lost. These right here are called columns. The vertical, well, columns, that's pretty self-explanatory. They kind of work as layers in OpenToonz. Anything that is in front of 1 right here, going from left to right, the more right you go, the more they're layered on top. So column 2 would be on top of column 1, 3 on top of 2 and 1, etc. So you kind of have to think about where you place these, and they can be moved and shifted around so you're not locked into them. These individual rows, this kind of like spreadsheet type thing, are called levels. Each one of these is a level. And so whenever I refer to these things, these are levels and columns, just so that makes sense. I might also refer to them as frames, probably not in this specific video. But another thing is that in OpenToonz, saving is kind of weird, and this is extremely, extremely important. If you haven't already learned how to properly save in OpenToonz, which I mean at this point you might have because it's been out for a while and you've probably been messing around with it, but in case you don't know, you can't just save an entire scene like you can in a lot of software. Like, for example, a scene, save scene, which is traditionally Control-S in most programs. Control-S will bring you a dialog box to save a scene, which I'm going to go ahead and do now. And I'm going to go ahead and call this, I'll just call this little girl. It's a TNZ file, I guess that's a Toonz save file. And then I get this weird no disk error. I'll just cancel it, and it'll work. And you can see right here that this is the file that I have open, little girl. So now that I have actually dedicated a file for this, I'll stop getting the weird pop-up that says cannot automatically save, which you might have seen. Before we begin, I'm going to go over more saving real quick. So yeah, load up preferences. That's kind of all the way down in the file. Load up your preferences real quick. And then in general, I have save automatically every blank minutes. You can put in a custom number. I went ahead and put in 5. So it'll save every 5 minutes. The downside to this is if you're working in a file that's unsaved, you'll get a pop-up every 5 minutes that says you cannot save an untitled file, which is kind of annoying, but once you have it designated, like I do right here, then it'll just automatically save every 5 minutes, which is good. And then, like I was saying, the scene is different from the levels and the palettes. Unfortunately, pressing Control-S doesn't save everything. For example, again, I draw a ball. If I press Control-S and save this scene, when I load it back up, the ball's not going to be there because, or correction, the column is going to be there. The name G1 will be there, but it will be red, and there will be no drawing. It'll save the scene, but the levels themselves will not be saved unless you save the levels. So pretty much you'll just have like a shell of everything that was in the scene, and I learned this the hard way before. That you're going to have all your columns and you're going to have all your frames laid out, but they're all going to be empty because you didn't save any of the levels. So to save a level, you can see right here, there's save level and there's save scene. Make sure to do both. Whichever column or whichever level you have currently selected is the level it will save when you press save level. There is no shortcut for saving a level in OpenToonz. So I think this was a tutorial from Blender Beetle. I'm pretty sure that was the name of the channel, who went ahead and gave some pretty decent advice as to go ahead and create a shortcut for that. And to create a shortcut, configure shortcut in the file menu. It is in menu commands and save level. So configure shortcuts, menu commands, file, save level. Go ahead and give it a shortcut of your choice. I went ahead and made it S, as the tutorial from Blender Beetle said, which is a pretty good shortcut for that in my opinion. So Control S to save your scene, and then S to save your current level. This will be important because we're going to be dealing with a lot of columns and a lot of individual levels, and you don't want to lose any of this information. Alright, so now we will actually get into this. For this video, I'm going to go ahead and do the head. So I'm just going to zoom in here on the head. Alright, cool. And so we're going to figure out how to break this head down. So like I said, a rigged character is just individual moving drawings. So this entire head won't be one drawing. You should think about how to break it down into the most moving parts you can. That makes sense. In this case, there's several different parts, but really only 3 that I would move individually, being the head with this part of the hair and the 2 balls of hair. I don't know what to really call those, just fluffies. These will sort of rotate from here, sort of pivoting like this. And then the head will obviously rotate, and rotate everything else with it. So, but that being said, I don't want this whole thing to be one object. I want the head to be one object. And there's a reason for this. I want the head to be one object, the hair to be another object, and then each eye, the iris, the nose, and the mouth to be separate objects, as well as the eyebrows. So I'm going to go ahead and start with just this head shape, or the skull in particular. And the way I'm going to do this is by drawing in raster and converting to vectors. Now, I mean, this might seem a little weird to you, but I don't like the way vectors handle in this software. And I mean, I don't really like vectors that much anyway, just from like a drawing perspective. They're a little bit harder to control. Like, for example, they start out by default as vectors, and they just don't line up as well as I'd like them to. And they're also pretty unclean, especially if you keep making new strokes. You really want them to be all one stroke. And my hands get a little shaky, so what you see is what you get if you work in vectors. Like that, for example, it doesn't look very good. So you'll see what I mean here. OpenToonz actually has really good raster to vector conversion, and it gets rid of a lot of shakiness in your hand. And also, it's just easier to draw in raster. So I'm going to go ahead and right click and click new level. If you start just drawing on an empty level, it'll make it a Toonz vector level by default with an arbitrary name. what I'm going to go ahead and do is select Toonz Raster Level. And then I'm going to name it, for this one I'll name it Little Girl Raster. And then the DPI, I don't want at 64, that's a little too low. I'm going to go ahead and set that to 300. And then click OK. That's what we want. And now you can see with this level selected in the column, the drawing control feels a lot different once you select raster, so you'll be able to tell that you're in raster. Also, these controls change. You have a hardness slider now on your brush, which controls the feathering of the edge, which I don't care for. I'm selecting 100. That's what I want. And now I'm just going to go ahead and get started. So I'm just going to start tracing this drawing, being very considerate of what happens to this object when it's not obscured. So not drawing any of these other objects, just drawing essentially that specific body part. Alright, not looking too bad. And then you can do, you can do a little cleaning up if you want. This one actually doesn't look too bad. I probably shouldn't do too much. Just refine some areas if you wish. The best part about rigged characters is each individual part is usually pretty simple, just because you don't have to deal with all the complex lines, really. You just sort of make each individual part, so you shouldn't be spending too much time on line work per part. I'm going to go ahead and select the eraser and just sort of clear up some of these edges, especially this one, which is kind of poking out. Alright, cool. That's good enough. You can see the lines are a little scraggly, but don't worry about that. That's fine, because the vector conversion in OpenToonz will take care of that, I promise. So, before I go into that, under the level tab, you'll see the convert to vectors. This is a custom interface. What I've created a room called General. To create a new room, you can just right click and click New Room, and then just sort of drag certain windows that you want. I wanted the X sheet, the combo viewer, and the palette editor, because I think it's a pretty standard workspace. It's the things that I use the most. But in the default cleanup view over here, you don't have the level tab. So if you're working from that, or maybe from Ink and Paint or something, you won't have that. So if you want to access it, you can go into the X sheet for it. There's levels right there. Or you can create a new window and put it in there for you. But you can also just keep jumping between X sheet and Ink and Paint, or whatever it is that you're currently using. But I think it's convenient to have everything that I want to use in one area, so that's why I have this sort of general tab that I made. So without further ado, I'm going to go to levels and just select convert to vectors, and then you get this cool little pop-up. That's actually pretty simple. There's not a whole lot of there's not a lot of detail on it. So biggest thing you want to make sure is that mode is set to centerline and not outline, and I'll sort of show you what that looks like. By default, it doesn't bring up a preview. To bring up a preview, just select this toggle swatch preview button, and then you have two identical or somewhat identical drawings. This one's the raster and this one's the vector, and you can zoom in and pan with the middle mouse button and the wheel. But like I said, the sort of scraggliness to these lines disappears with the vectorization. it actually looks pretty nice. And I got the line work done way faster than if I were to draw out vectors and try to place handles by hand and edit all that and edit thickness using all the tools. I mean, they're cool vector tools, but I personally just hate working with them. You can skip this step altogether. If you like working with vectors, you can just create each body part with vectors. But since I don't really work that way, I'm just going to work in raster and convert to vector. And you can edit these, you can experiment with these settings. I have mine set the way I want them to be set. And changing them doesn't do a whole lot. Most things that change would be thickness. If you have it set to 100, it'll pretty much be the same thickness that you drew it in, which is probably what you want. So I'm just going to click convert. And ta-da! If I just hide column 2 real quick. Now I have the head that I needed. Alright, cool. So before I go to the next step, I'm going to go ahead and rename this column. We want to keep this pretty organized, so we don't just want everything to just be named column 3, 4, 5. These are very specific parts, and we want them to appear as such. So I'm just going to double click on column 3 and start typing in, I think I'm going to name this skull. Not head necessarily, because you know, the head is the whole thing. So I'm just going to name this skull because that's pretty much just what this is. I mean, you can name it head. I mean, probably nothing bad would happen if you did, but that's just how I'm going to do it. And then, as you can see, the name for this level is Little Girl Raster V1. That's also not what we want. That's just pretty much Little Girl Raster with a V at the end for vector from the conversion. It just sort of gave it a naming convention. So we're going to go to level settings by right-clicking the level. And I'm going to change from Little Girl Raster V to skull again. And now we have skull and skull. Good stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and hide this part we just made because it'll kind of be in the way. Actually, no, I don't need to do that because of how I'm specifically working on this character. So before I do anything else, you can click and drag this little thing. I'm just going to sort of extend this out. You know, it doesn't really matter how far, but just extend it out so that if I select any level, this background will still be there. And I'm also going to go ahead and lock it right here, just, you know, just for safety. I'm going to go ahead and go to the next frame, or next, the next frame of this level, and go ahead and get started on the next part, which I want to be this hair right here. So I'm going to go ahead and get started on that. And, you know, just draw. I'm going to probably lower my maximum thickness for this part in particular. You know, try to work quickly to not bore you guys to death. This is sort of a process with a lot of repetition, so there are probably some things that you're just going to sort of get the point. Still debating on how I'm going to present some of this stuff. Maybe I'll fast forward a little bit. Probably not for this video because it's not a lot of drawing to do. When working with a tablet, the faster and more confident you make your strokes, likely the less wobbly they'll be, and the less you'll have to undo. Just keep it steady and keep it controlled. And some of these lines are kind of vague and you'll have to fill it in if you're following along. But you can be using your own character as well. How I work personally is I have kind of scraggly draft lines, so I'm pretty used to filling in scraggly lines or vague lines, but if that's not how you work, this might be a little bit hard for you. Another thing that I'm doing is if you hold spacebar and drag, you can pan and go straight back to the brush mode. But you have to hold it and drag. If you just press the spacebar, then it'll permanently be locked in the hand, and you're gonna have to go up and do that yourself. So just a quick tip, make sure that you just hold it down and you drag before you release so that you'll get to go back straight into the brush mode. Alright, so that's looking good. Yeah, nothing to complain about here. I'm going to go to level, convert to vectors. Check it out real quick. I think I'll turn the accuracy up just to get a little less bendiness with the sort of sharp edges. Alright, looks good. I'm going to go ahead and convert it. Alright, and you see that it created a new column with a level on the second frame, which we don't want. We want these all to be on the first frame. So you can just select this little guy on the side here, and then you can move it up and down. I'm going to move it up to 1. And we want this hair to be in front of the head. So I'm going to go ahead and slide it on over. And then, like last time, I'm going to rename it. And I'm going to name it hair _ scalp. And then right click level settings. Do the same. Cool. And now we're ready to go on to the next one. So, with less explaining from me on what I'm doing, this is all starting to just sort of make sense. So I'm just going to sort of work like normal. Actually, just a tiny weird bit of explanation. Since we're drawing things that don't exist, in real life, this band probably looks something more like this. Which is fine, you can do it like that. But to avoid problems, I like to extend things that are behind other objects out just a little bit further. For example, instead of just sort of looping it around like this, I'm going to go ahead and do this, which looks kind of strange because that's not what a hairband looks like. But that's okay, because that means that you can rotate it to a little bit more of an extreme without it sort of looking detached, which is important. Make these in a way so if you move them, they don't look detached and they'll always look connected, because there's plenty of leeway here for the lines to connect to the head properly. I'm going to go ahead and fill this in. And I've sort of been running through tracing this character, so I've got it down pretty quick. And like I said, you don't have to work in raster and convert to vector. That's just kind of like how I like to do it. But I'm going to go ahead and convert this to vectors. Looks good. Convert. Oops. If it says current selection is invalid, that means that you have the level selected because you were working on it, but it doesn't really process it like that. So just select it again, just the one that you are working on, and convert it. And again, I'm just going to drag up this frame. And actually, I like it where it is. If you think about it, when this hair bends, or if it happens to bend to an extreme that it probably will never bend to, but just in case, if you think about it, you don't want the hair coming in front of the face. You want it still going behind the head. So this is going to be the furthest behind, just always behind everything. So it's good that it's behind this skull, and it's behind the scalp hair. So I'm going to leave it where it is, and I'm going to call this, I'm just going to call this hair. And I will make this hair R. So what I'm doing is working in stage right. This is to the right of me, so it's hair R. You can also work in a character view, so this could technically be called L if you want it to be called L, hair L, because it's the left part of the character. You can work either way, just make sure that every time you need a left or right naming convention, you stick with it. So whichever one makes the most sense to you, choose it now and stick with it for the entire character. Don't switch between character and stage. You're going to get confused, and it's going to ultimately, you know, not work out for you, you know. So I'm going with stage. All of these are going to be stage. This eye is going to be R. This eyebrow is going to be R. The arm is going to be R. Don't switch it up. Sounds simple. You know, makes sense, but, you know, go back to other parts on the character if, you know, you come back to work on it and you forget which one you chose. Just make sure that you keep it consistent. So I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing and name it hair R. Keep it where it is. It's good. Draw again. For the left one. Sorry I haven't made a tutorial in a while, guys. Was distracted by 2 awesome games opening this weekend. Uncharted, obviously, and Doom, which were pretty awesome. Gotta find a way to pass the time. Some people don't like it when people sort of say things that are kind of irrelevant, but, you know, I'm just going to be explaining the same things over and over again at this point, and it's better than awkward silence, I gotta tell you. Alright, looking good. Convert to vectors. Look around. Looks good. Convert. Drag up. Hair L, since it's the opposite. And level settings. Hair L. Cool. All right. So now I think I'm going to save these. Yes, before I do anything else, I'm going to press Control S to save the scene. Remember to do this, guys. And with all of these, which have been made, if you close out of the scene now, like I said earlier, these drawings will not exist anymore. You'll load up the scene, you'll have all of your columns with their names, but they will be empty and you won't have drawings. You need to save each individual level. So I'm going to select this level, press S, select this level, press S, press S, press S, and I had, so now these are all saved. and I saw the little loading thing, so you know that it was doing some processing, so it was saving. And remember, S isn't the default shortcut. There is no shortcut for saving levels. You'll have to go to the file and save level manually for each individual one of these, or you can go and change a shortcut for that. But yeah, S won't just do it if you don't have it set to do that. So now that these are all saved, I'm going to go ahead and place my pivots. So I'm going to go ahead and start with the skull here, the first one that I made. And I'm going to go up to the edit tool. This is pretty easy to do, guys. We just need to change the center to the place where we want it to rotate from. So if we click center, we don't really see anything. But if we scroll down to like the middle of the scene, then you'll see the center. By default, it's just in the middle of the default camera. We don't want it there. We want it to go about right here. For this character, it makes sense that the place where the head rotates from is obviously in the middle of the neck, but also where the bottom of the jaw sort of meets. So we don't want it to like rotate from up here or like all the way down here. That would look kind of weird. It would look the most natural if it rotates from the middle of the neck and the bottom of the jaw. So if you're working on your own character, that's the best place to put it. Alright. Now I'm going to go ahead and do the hair for this one. This is hair L. So I'm just going to go ahead and select this on the edit mode, change the center. And I'm going to change the center to be about here. Right here where it sort of meets in the middle from like the root of this scrunchie. And we can sort of test this by selecting rotation. See? So now it's just sort of individually moving. Makes sense. Cool stuff. Gonna go ahead and do this to the right one now. Send it to center. Drag it. Set it to about the same location. Maybe give it a quick little test. Looks alright. And then this one's kind of weird, the hair scalp, because this object isn't gonna really be doing any rotating. Like, I'm gonna go ahead and say that it's pretty much not going to do any rotating. So I'm gonna go ahead and move the center to a pretty logical place for rotation anyway. Like about right here, just at the middle where it meets, and we can, you know, rotate it from there. But as you can see, it does look pretty weird, and nobody's hair moves like this, so it's not going to rotate there. But the reason why I'm placing it there is just because there should be a logical and unique pivot point for all of your objects. And it may seem kind of irrelevant, but you don't want to clutter up your scene with static objects that are parented to the center of the camera, because then you're going to have, well, you're going to have a problem with just having a bunch of bones from the bone tool being in that spot and everything just being parented to the center of the camera, which will just get confusing for you. You want everything to be obviously where it is. Even if you're not going to be rotating it, you should probably move your pivots. Alright, so that's everything that I've made so far. The reason I didn't color them one by one is because I wanted to talk about palettes. More importantly, project palettes. I'm kind of trying to figure out a use for project palettes. The issue I have been coming up with in this program is that you cannot really carry palettes over to other levels. Each level has its own palette. So for this, it's kind of bad because I want her skin on her head to be the same as the skin on her neck and the skin on her arms, as well as the hair colors to be exactly the same. The problem is you have to start a new palette from scratch if you're going with a level palette, which sucks. I mean, you can always create a new palette, color picker, and pick the color. I've had some weird glitches with the color picker only working sometimes. Not really sure what it is. But the real big problem with it is that it doesn't update in real time. You change the palette on this one because you decide that you want the hair color to be different. You're going to have to update each thing that has the same exact color, which just kind of sucks. And I'm going to go ahead and work with a project palette, even though it doesn't quite solve this problem. At least not in a way that makes it significantly more convenient, but I do want to cover it anyway. So over in the Studio palette, this is called the Studio palette window. If you just have the level palette, that's not the same thing. You can go up to Windows and click Studio palette. For Studio palette, I'm going to go up into the Project Palettes folder and just select New Palette. And I'm going to give this a name. Little Girl PAL. And then I got a error, no disk. That's no big deal. I don't know why I get this error from this program. Just select cancel. Guaranteed that it will still create space for it. Alright, so the project palette creates palettes that are linked. But as far as I can see, they don't update in real time. You have to manually update them, so it still requires an extra step. But it is nice to have them all in one place. So I'm going to go ahead and work here first. So I'm going to make one for skin, for the skin tone. Just sort of click here to make a new palette. And I'm going to go ahead and edit it. Maybe put auto apply on. And make this a little bigger so I can work a little easier. And make, a darkish skin tone for her. Gotta find the sweet spot for this sort of thing. This is looking pretty good. You can always come back to it because things always look different when you fill them in. I'm gonna go ahead and make one for the hair. Actually, I'm gonna go ahead and name this. For this one, for this specific tutorial, it will be good to name these. I'm gonna name this one hair, which will be significantly darker. Like that. Alright, good. So, here we are. Now I'm going to go ahead and start coloring in. So, I'm going to start with the head. Right here. Just go ahead and select the skull. And then as you can see, in this palette, we only have black, because on this level, we only have black in the level palette. And you can't select from here and fill it in. Trust me, I've tried. It needs to be on the level palette. But what you can do is you can select skin. Hold Control and just drag it into this palette. So now it's part of it. And we can just fill it in with the paint bucket. Again, select paint bucket, make sure it's set to areas. And just press it like that. Cool. Now I'm going to go to hair, scalp, and do the same. But I need hair for this one, so I'm going to control and drag it. Hair. Color. Cool. For this one, drag hair. Oops. Color. This one on the right one, control drag hair, select it, color. And then I didn't make one for the scrunchies yet, so I'm just going to go back to the Studio palette. Oops. The way I have my thing set up at the moment is kind of strange. My keyboard is behind my tablet. My on-screen tablet, which is also behind my mic, so I don't want to hit it. So it's a little weird. And what color do I want to make this? For now, I'll just go ahead and make it pink. You can always change these later. Desaturate it a little bit. Drag it. There we go. Drag it on the other one. And select. So there we go. Now we have the basis of the head colored in. And now we can sort of look at the rotation of like the hair just to see how this looks. So you can see here that with it behind all this, it is moving pretty appropriately to how you'd want it to. And like I said, pulling the drawing out just a little bit like that makes it so that we can just push it to a little bit more extremes, because otherwise we'd have this sort of coming down straight and then it would just sort of look like it was detaching. So we can just sort of pull it to more extremes without having to worry about looking like it's detaching. I'm just going to keep undoing until it goes back into its default position. Alright, so I'm not going to cover the face because the eyes have a really specific way of doing them that isn't like the rest of this. So I sort of want these tutorials made in a way so that if you're looking for information on a very specific thing, you'll be able to just refer to it rather than there being a bunch of fluff about stuff that you might already know, but hey, you really want to know how to make the eyes, and that's the only thing you really need to take away from this particular video, then I just want it to be so that you know, the face one is just a little bit shorter and a little bit more to the point on that specific subject. So I'm not going to cover the face in this video, but it shall be coming soon enough. But what I'm going to do is cover hierarchy real quick at the end, because as you can see, if we rotate the skull, it just rotates alone. That's not what we want. We want the whole head to move if we rotate the skull. So what we are going to do is go into the schematic view by selecting Windows and selecting schematic. So what we have here is this node setup. And the way you might be seeing it is like this, where it's red to blue, like this. Go ahead and select this button, the second one from the right, just so we get this A/B system. Now this isn't super important now, but this is a much more robust node system. I don't really know why it's separated the way it is. This is a little tiny bit more confusing, but just know that for now we're just collecting beats, or we're just connecting B to B. Alright, so I'm just going to select these two and just sort of pull them out of the way and just deal with this. So you can see it's really nice how we named it, because if this was just column 1, 2, 3 and all that, you're going to have to be looking to here in the X sheet to figure out what exactly it is that you're referring to. But since it's named in a logical manner, we can just work from there. So we're going to parent these. I'm going to teach you how to parent real quick. It's pretty easy. So we go from the table, and then you select your skull. Well, if we rotate the skull, we want the rest of the head to follow it. So simple enough, we don't want this to be parented. We don't want these objects to be parented to the table. We want these objects to be parented to the skull. So I'm just going to select from B to this B port, to this B port, and to this B port. So now we have if we rotate the skull, these will rotate with it. Just like if you were to rotate the table, all of these will rotate with it. But for this one, we just want the skull to rotate these things. And that's it. That's literally all we had to do. This will get probably a little bit more complicated later, but for the head, super easy breakdown on this character. Now with the skull selected in the edit mode right here, we can just do this. Whoa, look at that. We can rotate the head here, rotate the hair here, rotate this hair, go back to the skull, and we have this. So rigged characters are super cool. You can create a couple of different poses with just one drawing, which isn't too bad. I'm going to go ahead and undo to get these back to where they should be though. And yeah, that's all I have for you guys today. I'll see you in the next tutorial where I'll cover doing the face and most importantly, how to properly do the eyes. There are two ways. One of them's good and one of them's not as good, but could still be useful. So anyway, thank you guys. This probably was running way longer than I wanted it to. Whew, almost an hour. Well, I guess that's why they call it an advanced tutorial. I did spend a lot of time covering stuff in the beginning before I dove in, and I don't regret that because the saving is important and the terminology and explanation for what exactly it is I'm doing is obviously important. So for an introductory video, that's not so bad. 52 minutes. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed. We'll have another one out for you soon. Yeah. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll have more for you. OpenToonz tutorials, and possibly some Blender tutorials in the future. See you guys.